Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for February 22nd through 28th. This week I read 1 book, I watched 4 movies, and I listened to 3 books. First this week I finished A Grim Reaper's Guide to Cheating Death. This is the second in the Scythe series. The first one was A Grim Reaper's Guide to Catching a Killer, and I remember really enjoying that first one. I think I consumed it as an audiobook, and the main character was this woman in her 40s who was having a lot going on in her personal life, and I'm also quite certain her name was Kathy. So that was a little bit weird for me because it's weird to have a book be talking directly to you until you realize they're not actually talking to you, they're talking to the character. That's happened to me a couple of times this year, and it's weird. In any case, I thought we were going to pick back up with what was going on with Kathy at the end of that book, but it turns out that this book is in a completely different person's perspective. Now, Nina also works for Scythe, but she does a lot of the administrative paperwork, so she's not out actually collecting souls. And it's her 26th birthday, and she sits down like any other day to do her job, and one of the names in the paperwork she's meant to distribute to the agents is somebody she knows. And she's like, hell no, this person is not gonna die. Everybody else I'm related to is gonna die, not this person. And then, as the title implies, it becomes a whole thing about cheating death. I both enjoyed this because it had its fun and ridiculous and heartfelt moments, and thought the pacing was a little bit off. This is meant to be a mystery at the end of the day, and we're trying to figure out who is trying to kill this other person, but it takes us a really long time to get to the situation in which we know that somebody is trying to kill him specifically. Because at first the cause of death on his sheets has nothing to do with another person, and then suddenly it seems very apparent that somebody wants him dead, but nobody knows why. And because it took so long to get to that point, I kind of forgot that this was really supposed to be focusing on that mystery. In any case, I enjoyed it well enough, and when a 3rd book comes out in this series, I will read it. On to the movies I watched this week. I watched one of these specifically because of one of the books I listened to this week, so guess which one that is before I get to my audiobooks. The first movie I watched this week is Wicked for Good. This is the second part in the Wicked duology. And this is something I had seen before, so I've talked to you about it before, but the reason I was watching it this time is my roommate Megan hadn't seen it yet, and we watched the first one together, so she's like, hey, wanna watch this? I'm like, yes, of course I do. Going into it, I let her know that there were 2 songs that were added to this portion of the musical, and I asked her if she could identify which ones those were, and she was right on one of them. The other one tied the lyrics so seamlessly into the Wizard of Oz that she was duped. Obviously, being the second part in a duology, I can't really tell you that much about it. If you haven't heard about it yet, I'm so sorry for you. This is based on a book that I read back in high school, and I probably haven't read since about my early 20s, because I did have a copy in my early 20s, and I actually lent it to a friend who was going on vacation, and they left it in the really, really hot sun of where they were staying, and the binding actually melted, so I never got my copy of that book back. In any case, because I loved the book and I knew about the music in my teens, when I was living in the UK in my early 20s, I did end up going to see the show live twice while I was in London. And, if memory serves, that one time I went to an Idina Menzel concert in Scotland, she actually sang at least one of the songs from this, because she was just doing a very wide range of songs from her career and things that she's written herself and songs that she just likes. And it just brings me great joy to remember that I've heard her sing songs live. Moving on, the next movie I watched this week is 28 Years Later, and in itself is the first part of a duology of 28 Years Later movies, because we started with 28 Days Later, and then later there was 28 Weeks Later, and now there's 28 Years Later, and then there's going to be another 28 Years Later movie within the next couple of years, is my understanding. If you didn't hear me talk about the other films recently, because we've been watching them to get to this point, this is about a zombie outbreak that happened in the UK, and this is 28 years after that happened, and it's based on a very small island off the coast of Northumbria. At least I'm sure that's where that has to be, because they actually pointed out something that I've seen in Northumbria when they went to the mainland, and I was like, okay, that's where the island has to be near, right? Because it's not like they're driving around this island to try to find things, they're walking. In any case, obviously there are people that have been born into this situation, and we're following a small boy named Spike, whose father is bringing him to the mainland for the first time to go hunting, basically. And of course, chaos ensues. And at the end of this, I can see how we're setting ourselves up for another movie in this time frame. The third movie I watched this week, simply because my roommates were watching it, was Inglourious Basterds. I thought I had seen this whole film before, but the only parts that actually seemed familiar to me that I know I watched with my own eyeballs, and wasn't just a conversation that somebody retold to me because they thought it was really clever, is up until the point where the bastards are in the forest. I think that that's enough that the people that have seen it will know about how far I got in, which was not very far. This, if you've never never heard about before, is about a band of Jewish American people in the military who are specifically out there to kill Nazis. There are various different plots to do that, they are quite skilled at doing that, and they are looking to end the war. Woo-wee! There's some monologuing in this and some clever things in this, and it's enjoyable for an action flick. The final movie that I watched this week is the 1985 classic Clue. If you've never seen it before, it is based on the board game where you have to figure out who did it in what room with what item. There is a very small chance I maybe saw this as a kid, but I don't remember it, so I'm counting this as my first viewing of it. And this one is extra mysterious because these people have been gathered to this location that they've never been to before, and they've been given aliases, and they're not supposed to tell each other who each other actually is, and they come to find out that all of them are being blackmailed by the same person. And then that person ends up dead and they have to figure out how before the police arrive. Because the police were already going to show up to arrest the person who was blackmailing them, but now he's dead and they have to explain that. This movie has some actors in it that you will definitely recognize, however you might not actually recognize them as they look in this film, because if you're anything like me, you're used to Martin Mull from like the late 90s, early 2000s whenever Sabrina was on, and if you look at him in this you're like, oh, Colonel Mustard turns into Sabrina's teacher? What? Also, Christopher Lloyd is in this, and he's got brown hair, which is just weird in itself, because I think we all know him as Doc Brown from Back to the Future. The guy who plays Chuck on Better Call Saul is Mr. Green. And of course, Wadsworth, the butler, is Tim Curry, and I adore him. Onto the books I listened to this week, the first one being The Case of the Missing Maid. This one takes place, I believe it was in Chicago in 1898, and it follows this woman who is the very first woman to ever be hired to be a junior detective at a detective agency. This causes quite a stir because women can't be detectives, obviously, but the guy in charge of the agency actually hires her to do so, and this causes quite a confusion because everybody in like the typing pool thinks that she's supposed to be working with them, but she's not. And there's definitely somebody at the office that's messing with her because some of her stuff starts going missing, somebody slashes the tires on her bicycle, she's just trying to do her job, people. So she's starting out the very first week, and her boss has actually given her this job that he thinks shouldn't take her too long because he has this neighbor that his wife is really friendly with, and this neighbor says that her maid is missing, and he's just like, I'm sure she's just gonna find her, she's probably just in one of the billion rooms in that house because she's loaded and she's got a huge house, so just go over there, find the maid. When she gets there, however, she finds evidence to suggest that her maid was actually taken and does have to figure out where she might have gone. But then she has to fight against people that she works with who think that she's just incompetent, and it's very annoying, especially because she is also the sole provider for her younger brother because their parents are both deceased. So not only does she need this job because it pays way better than her previous job, but she's also racking up all of these costs because her bike's tires get slashed, she's constantly ruining a few of her clothing items based on activities that happen while she's investigating. And to my utter delight, this book is also queer, and I'll just let you find out about that as you read it. I very much enjoyed this. If this is the beginning of a series, and I'm not entirely certain that it is, I would definitely read more of it. As for the audiobook that prompted me to watch one of the movies that I watched this week, that was Vagabond by Tim Curry. This is his memoir and it is read by the author, which is such a delight. Tim Curry was born April 19th, I believe 1946. I'm bad at 2s and 6s, so it might have been 42, but I'm quite certain it's 46. Which means that when Clue was released, he was the same age that I am. He is an actor of stage and screen and voiceover work, and I absolutely adore him, and I have for a very long time. However, that definitely doesn't mean I've seen everything he's ever done because there has been a lot. So although I was very delighted to hear him talk about certain roles that I definitely know him from in this book, I was also very delighted to find out about things that I didn't know about his career. And just his life in general, because obviously he's been around for quite some time, so his life has overlapped with many famous people's lives. For example, on his gap year, he just ran into Picasso, and in my brain, Picasso shouldn't be a person who was alive at the same time as Tim Curry, and yet that's definitely a thing. I think it's just because I actually saw Picasso in the Hermitage when I was in Moscow back in 2004 that makes me think that that is art that should be much older than it actually is. I also didn't exactly know that he knew Richard O'Brien because they were both in the cast of Hair, and Richard O'Brien actually wrote Rocky Horror Show while he was backstage of Jesus Christ Superstar. But in any case, when they ran into each other on the street one day, he's like, oh yeah, I have a show that's going up and they're trying to cast this one role of Rocky. He's just this big muscly guy. Maybe you could try to audition for it? And Tim goes in there and if I'm remembering correctly, sings Miss Tutti Frutti, but like an off-the-wall outlandish version of it, and from that they cast him as Frank. So he originated that role in Rocky Horror Show in a 60-seat theater. Then he was the only cast member to be transferred to the LA cast, then obviously starred in the movie and was also in the New York cast. New York didn't like it as much as LA did. And he was once at a viewing of the movie with some of his friends, and somebody came up and said, "You're causing too much disturbance because people think that you're Tim Curry, but I know that you're not Tim Curry, so I think you need to leave." And he shows this woman his passport, and she's like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry." And he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm leaving." There are countless other very cool and interesting stories that he has to tell, so I highly recommend this one. The third audiobook I listened to is the beginning of a series for kids, and that's Nevermoor, The Trials of Morrigan Crow. This is about a girl named Morrigan who is on the Cursed Child's Registry, which means that anytime there's something that goes wrong in her town, people in her town blame it on her. Your crops failed? She looked at you one time. You didn't win the spelling bee? It's not your fault that you didn't know that treacle doesn't have a K in it. She definitely wished you good luck, so it's her fault. In addition to everyone just being really mean and spiteful towards you when you're on the Cursed Child Registry, it also means that you are fated to die on a very certain year, and this ends up being her 11th birthday. However, this is a book for kids and it is very magical, so that gets skirted around when this guy actually shows up to whisk her off to this completely different place that she didn't even know existed, and put her into these trials to be accepted into something called the Wonder Society. When you're in the Wonder Society, the whole society becomes like your family, which she deeply needs because her own family was incredibly neglectful. She's pretty hesitant though, because everybody who's accepted has a knack, a special talent, and she doesn't know what that is, but her patron says, "Don't worry about it, I know exactly what it is, I'll tell you when we get to that trial." This is full of delight and whimsy, and I've already borrowed the second audiobook from the library. That's it for this week. If you read, watch, or listen to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!